President Buhari proposes 16.3 trillion naira budget for 2022. 700 megawatts of Zingiro plant ready for investors takeover. AFCFTA has the potential to lift over 100 million Africans out of poverty, says Central Bank of Nigeria. Chinese stocks rise on return to trade after a Golden Week holiday. Details of this and more on Business Express on the network service of the NTA. We're reaching you live from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Musa Abubakar. It's good to have you join us. Let's begin with the budget. A 16.39 trillion naira budget of economic growth and sustainability has been proposed for expenditure by the federal government for its services in the 2022 fiscal year. President Muhammadu Buhari presented the appropriation bill before the joint session of the National Assembly. He described it as crucial in his administration's efforts at ensuring that critical projects are completed, put to use, and improve the general living conditions of Nigerians. State House correspondent Musambo reports.
It was a warm and befitting welcome for President Muhammadu Buhari in the hallowed chamber of the National Assembly as he formally presents the 2022 Appropriations Bill for consideration and approval. The budget proposal, the last expected to be fully implemented by this administration, is predicated on conservative oil price benchmark of $57 per barrel, oil production estimate of 1.88 million barrels per day, an exchange rate of 410 naira 15 kobo to $1, a projected GDP growth rate of 4.2%, as well as an inflation rate of 13%. The budget is made up of a capital expenditure of 5.35 trillion naira, non-debt recurrent cost of 6.85 trillion naira, personnel cost of 4.11 trillion naira, 3.61 trillion naira for debt service, and a sinking fund of 292.71 billion naira.
Our target over the medium term is to grow our revenue to GDP ratio from about 8% currently to 15% by 2025. At that level of revenue, the debt service to revenue ratio will cease to be worrying. Put simply, we do not have a debt sustainability problem, but a revenue challenge which we are determined to tackle.
As the Buhari presidency proposes, the 2022 budget is expected to be funded by 10.13 trillion naira oil, non-oil, and other revenues, while a deficit of 6.26 trillion naira will be financed by new borrowings, privatization process, and drawdowns on loans secured for specific development projects.
Some have expressed concern over our resort to borrowing to finance our fiscal gaps. They are right to be concerned. However, we believe that the debt level of the federal government is still within sustainable limits. Borrowing at specific strategic projects and can be verified publicly. Very importantly, we have endeavored to use the loans to finance critical development projects and programs aimed at improving our economic environment and ensuring effective delivery of public services to our people.
Meanwhile, the National Assembly says it will keep the promise of ensuring the passage of the 2022 appropriation bill before the end of the year to sustain the January to December budget cycle. During the budget presentation, the leadership commended the president for submitting the proposal in good time.
Like many other countries, Nigeria was able to come out of the recession due to the ability of this administration to deploy the resources to support the economy. Mr. President, the second quarter GDP report released by the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, Nigeria's gross domestic product GDP increased by 5.01% in the second quarter of 2021, the strongest growth since first quarter of 2014. Is a trajectory that we need to sustain.
Ensuring greater fidelity to the letter and spirit of our appropriation laws have led to the measurable improvements in public infrastructure, access to education and housing, healthcare, and transportation, among other things.
The federal budget proposal for 2022 is expected to accelerate recovery and promote inclusive growth. Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, while giving a breakdown of the budget, said in addressing youth, education and unemployment, the federal government is in its second year of targeted investment of 25 billion naira to achieve that.
In line with the commitment that Mr. President made after the NSAS protests, there was a fund of 75 billion naira that was set up. We made, and he said it was supposed to be provided over a 3-year period. So for 2021, we provided 25 billion, and it is in the 2021 budget. And for 2022, we have made another provision. You will find it in the service-wide for the Nigeria Youth Fund, also of 25 billion. On the issue of gender sensitivity, so what we have done is, during the call circular, encourage MDAs to, as they are making provisions for their programs and projects, to use a gender lens, to be asking ourselves every program of government that we plan, how do we get more women involved, and or how does the program even affect women?
Now, still on the budget matters, I have joining me Dr. Chijoke Ekechukwu. He is an economist, and together we shall be looking at the 2022 budget. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Okay, first of all, what's your perception of the budget?
First of all, I want to commend the President for yet again presenting the budget to the National Assembly on time. Back to back, he has been able to achieve that. And it was also good that the National Assembly promised that they were going to ensure the timing will be right to be able to deliver it within the fiscal year. So, having said that, I also looked at the various benchmarks and the figures. I think they were acceptable to Nigerians and to economists and to me. When you look at the benchmark of $57 per barrel for the oil price, knowing that here today we have it about 80, I'm also saying for people who are saying the budget was going to be a budget of borrowing and things like that to be able to fund the deficit, we're going to have a lot of savings. Even from day one, we're going to be having savings from the area of the price difference between the 57 to and the $80 per barrel. And so we also look at the exchange rate at 410. Obviously gives an opportunity for the federal government to be able to get good pricing for the oil. And of course, as our revenue base comes a lot from oil, when that exchange rate remains, we're going to get a good return for it to be able to fund the budget. And so I am thinking that it's a very considerate and reasonable budget, and then that's my indication.
Okay, looking at the projections and plans, don't you think it's too ambitious?
They're not too ambitious, actually. That was actually where I was heading to. I didn't look at them as too ambitious. For example, I mentioned the oil price at 57. Assuming the president looked at the current oil price today of about 80 and decided to fix the oil price at 75, would have called it an ambitious budget. But we are so certain that such projections have been made to be so. And of course, when you also look at the output expectation of 1.88 million barrels per day, it's also not ambitious, because we had at the time produced up to 2.2 million barrels a day. And so the only place I have a little worry was the place of having to expect that inflation rate may reduce as low as 13%. The reason for that worry is just as a result of the fact that if we are expecting to implement the PIA, if we're expecting to implement the PIA, we're also expecting that subsidy may be dropped. If subsidy is dropped, petroleum subsidy may be dropped. If that is done, we don't expect that the oil price or petroleum price, pump price, is going to be as what it is now. It is likely to be higher than what we're expecting. And if it is higher, it's going to...
And will that affect inflation?
Oh, yes. It's going to actually affect the prices of goods and services, and that's going to also worsen the inflation rate. Okay,
there's this insistence on gender inclusion. What's your take on that? Will that actually affect the recovery process and improve incomes?
Oh, yeah. Again, when you look at the population, the demography of this country today, you know that once you're able to provide enough sources of livelihood through the women, a lot of poverty would be resolved and solved. So I think that's what the whole world works for. If you have ever listened to a lot of these multilateral companies, institutions, the World Bank, when they're doing the advert, they always say they are encouraging women to be part of what they're doing. So if we are able to alleviate poverty from that area using the women, I think poverty will just be heavily alleviated from our society.
Okay, you made mention of deficit earlier.
Yes.
How do we bridge the deficit now?
Yeah, the deficit is there. Hardly would you see any economy, any budget without deficit all over the world. Now, how you bridge such deficits is where we have to, worry. But in our own case, like I said, we're already going to have some savings. We're already going to have some savings from the gap we're seeing. And if we are going to be more efficient in collections of our taxes, all kinds of taxes, without actually increasing taxes, if we even are efficient in collecting taxes that we should collect from the various billionaires that exist that are not known, then I'm sure we'll get more money, more funds from there.
But when
and the way to do that
okay,
is just to deploy technology, not the type we have right now, to deploy more technology to track every single person to know who is supposed to be paying pro rata taxes on their income, on the kind of revenues they have. And so the next way we're going to bridge it is just to make sure that a lot of revenue generating MDAs, many of them are really still up to date and not remitting exactly what they're supposed to remit to federal coffers. And so once we're able to also perfect the methods of making sure that all the MDAs generating revenue for the government are actually remitting same to the treasury of the country, then we will get more.
Okay, tax improvement drive. Yes. Just today, the FRS chairman observed Nigeria's tax base has reached 41 million. Our tax income is still behind South Africa. You know?
Yes.
So what's going on?
We need to be more efficient. We need to be more efficient. You see, I'm sure you know and we know that the only people that are very, very certain of how much they pay in taxes are the payee. They pay people who are earning salary like you, like me, like all of us. But when we go to corporate bodies doing billions of naira, you see that manipulation of figures may be possible, and they pay less. With good technology, you cannot escape from all those. Your income can be tracked at any level, and you cannot pay anything less than what you're supposed to pay. So there are a lot of people who are supposed to be paying taxes today that are not paying exactly what they're supposed to pay, just because we don't have enough technology to be able to track them. Of course, some bits of corruption in those areas may actually inhibit the kind of money we expect from tax collections.
Okay, now in addressing revenue problems identified by governments, how can government encourage openness in tax declaration and also income?
Technology, I said so, technology. And in doing so, in talking about revenue, you see that the revenue generation of the country, oil export is doing up to 90% of that. And then non-oil export is doing that. And of course, when you talk about the contribution of non-oil sector to GDP, is far more than the contribution of oil sector to GDP. What it tells us is that we can really generate a lot of revenue from non-oil sector. In other words, there is still a latent gap, that exists in the non-oil sector for us to generate a lot of revenue. The non-oil sector is growing the GDP, yet we're not getting enough of revenue from the non-oil sector. That tells us that we need to do more in the non-oil sector in order to get more revenue, so that there won't be so much pressure on us on the volatility of oil. And that is just what it is that has been happening. We need to concentrate so much on the non-oil sector in order to see how we can generate more revenues from there.
Okay, you talked about the deficit not being, of concern. But what about the debt burden? Will it affect our debt burden? Already we have.
Yeah, first of all, the president has promised that the borrowings are going to be they are going to be accountable for the borrowings, and of course, for major priority projects, those ones they will do. But we also expect that those should be able to generate revenue. They should not just remain capital projects all the way. They should be able to generate revenue, because once you borrow to generate revenue, just like any other business concern, just like any other individual, if you borrow to use it to just go and build a house or buy a car, there's not going to be any revenue. So as a country, we should be able to borrow and do certain businesses and do certain transactions and do certain capital expenditure that will generate income, and that will form part of the revenue. So that we spend to generate revenue in order for us to be able to pay back what we have borrowed.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chijoke Ekechiko. Thank you for coming.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Now, moving on, the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDEN, has certified and accredited 150 businesses, development service providers under the National Business Development Service Providers in Abuja. Boside Abel, who was at the event, said the exercise is to identify challenges facing the MSMEs subsector in the country.
Audit practicing license to assist MSMEs in capacity training and facilitate desired growth required of them for the development of MSMEs in the country.
We are going to train entrepreneurs to be self-reliant.
Can you imagine if we now have competent people hand-holding and coaching them, how fast we can grow the economy?
The Director General of SMEDEN, Umaru Diko Rado, said SMEDEN established this framework for making sure the content of business development service providers is of the minimum standard and can propel Nigeria MSMEs to compete effectively with their peers across the globe.
We play a very major role in ensuring that we produce MSMEs that can help to move the economy of this country to a greater height.
Nobody knows everything. Each of the BSPs have the areas of specialty, and they can benefit from one another.
The Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Marian Katagun, said supporting small businesses is essential to increasing productivity, creating jobs and boosting the economy.
I would like to congratulate the awardees for having the technical capacity to pass through the accreditation process.
This framework is established by SMEDAN to standardize the delivery of business development service BDS to MSMEs in Nigeria that can propel MSMEs to compete effectively across the globe.
Well, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, says the African Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to lift over 100 million Africans out of poverty while increasing wages, including those of women and unskilled workers, if implemented successfully. The Director of Corporate Communications of the bank, Osita Owasobi, who stated this, said that the Apex Bank's primary goal was to restore economic stability by assisting individual SMEs and major corporations that had been badly damaged by the pandemic, as well as the lockdown measures of the year 2020. He added that the Anchor Borrowers Program provided more than 756 billion naira to 3.7 million farmers, cultivating over 4.6 million hectares of farmland.
Critical objective was to restore stability in the economy by providing assistance to individuals, MSMEs, and large corporates that have been severely impacted by the pandemic. The operation of e-Naira is safe. I therefore appeal to Nigerians to embrace the e-Naira, just like our beloved Naira.
We understand the dimension and the depth of issues involved in being a central banker in times of national economic emergency.
Manufacturers in Nigeria have been encouraged to continue to build the resilience that the country needs to scale through the present economic challenges. President, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, Mansour Ahmed, who stated this, urged them to prepare the economy for the headwinds that are still ahead and take advantage of the opportunities offered by the challenges, while acknowledging the opportunities coming from the efforts of companies in Africa to build a stronger, deeper and wider prosperous market. He added that as manufacturers, they are already witnessing the emergence of new ways of organizing our businesses arising from the imposition of the constraints of COVID-19, which is through the emergence of digital and virtual ways of engaging and connecting businesses. Gold held steady on Friday as investors stayed away from making big bets ahead of the U.S. non-farm payrolls report that is considered key to Federal Reserve stimulus taper timeline. Stocks continue movement and positive trajectory to see the all-share index rise to 40,868.36 points. 331 shares worth 2.918 billion naira are traded in 3,986 deals. Equity capitalization closed at 21.295 trillion naira. Now, Chinese stocks jump on first day of trade after a week-long holiday. Bossade Abel is here with the global market report.
Thank you, Musa. Hello and welcome to the global market review. Markets have fluctuated hard over the past week as global investors access the possibility of persistent high inflation, with U.S. bond yields driving jitters for growth-oriented tech stocks. U.S. stocks index futures were little change Friday as Wall Street awaits the September jobs report. Futures contracts tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 34 points. S&P 500 0.0 0.07%, and Nasdaq Composite also topped 0.02%. European market pulled back slightly on Friday after a roller coaster week for global stocks, with investors focused now turning to a key U.S. job report. FTSE 100 was slightly positive, while Nasdaq Composite and while DAX and CAC 40 depreciated. While in Asia, Chinese stocks rose on the first day of the trading week after a long holiday, tracking other stock markets across Asia-Pacific markets on Wall Street. Data on Friday also showed that the services activity on China returned to positive territory. Nikkei topped 1.34% at 28,048.94. Shanghai Composite appreciated 0.67% at 3,592.17. And the Hang Seng Index also rose 0.55% across 24,837.85. While Africa's stock markets are mixed, with South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 topping 0.11%. Nairobi's all-share was unchanged. Tunisia's Tunidex was negative at 0.26%, while Namibia's overall index and Ghana's GXC Composite also rose, just like their South Africa counterparts.
Well, it looks like markets ain't looking bad after all.
Of course, there has been, positive trend this week.
Okay, that's it. Business Express returns on Monday. Do have a pleasant weekend.